I'm Leo Hero, and welcome to this conversation with regards to something that is really important. In these times, what we're facing is an epidemic of scams and identity theft. And I don't know about you, but I don't like being scammed, and I don't like my identity being taken. I want to be and I want to remain unique. So what we're here to do is to educate, inform, and promote the type of things that all of us should be doing to preventing and avoiding scams and identity theft.
My name is Ed Pei. I'm the Executive Director of the Hawaii Bankers Association. And we're pleased to have helped to form a coalition called Hawaii's Partnership Against Fraud. The whole purpose of this coalition is to gather all the resources, all the multiple resources in our community that are focused on elderly abuse and financial scams, and to try to deliver the message that if it's too good to be true, it probably is. And so we want people to think before they act, to really question the offer, especially if it sounds so attractive, to make sure that they know what they're doing, and before they actually take the plunge and do something that they will later regret.
Aloha, my name is Iris Ikeda Katalani, and I am the Commissioner of Financial Institutions at the Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs. And I'm here today to talk about some of the cases that we see that have been brought to our attention from consumers who have been scammed. There are a lot of scams going on, and as Ed said, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. And so today we're here to share what you can do to not be a victim of some of these scams.
So, we're going to start our program. Let's get to work. So we've got our introduction, and let's get a little deeper into the material. And let's start out by giving people an idea of the types of institutions that your division regulates.
Okay, so our division is part of the Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs. We regulate the banks, so all of the state-chartered banks, and it's not all of the banks in Hawaii. It would be the big ones: Bank of Hawaii, First Hawaiian Bank, Central Pacific Bank, Ohana Pacific Bank, Finance Factors, Territorial Savings Bank. So it's the ones that you hear most often. So some of the banks that do not fall under our jurisdiction is American Savings Bank and Hawaii National Bank. And that's because they're what's called national banks. So they have a charter, it's called a bank charter, that's regulated by a different federal regulator, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. A similar regulatory scheme, it's just that we do not get involved in any of the complaints from any consumers. So what happens is, because consumers don't know where to turn, they all write to us, which is fine, and then we forward the complaint over to the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, if that's where it should go. We also regulate escrow depositories. So escrow depositories, these are companies that you use to help with your real estate transaction. So let's say you're buying a piece of property, so your real estate agent would open escrow for you at one of these companies. It would be Title Guarantee, Old Republic, some of those type of companies. And so you put the money in, your escrow fees, or the money to be used for the real estate transaction, into one of these escrow depository companies. They hold on to it in safekeeping, and then once the transaction is completed, then they transfer the money to the proper parties. So we also regulate money transmitters. So these are folks that are the old style, which is the Western Union, American Express, Traveler's Checks. There are some, and they all have local partners. They're in all of our institutions where, Safeway, Longs, you see MoneyGram, Western Union, to transfer money.
Aren't these the ones that scammers are using as a means of getting you to send them money?
Right. And so sometimes, for most of the transactions, they're all legitimate transactions. There are folks here who are working, trying to get money back home to their loved ones who are in another country, and that is pretty much not the only way, but the least expensive way to get money from Hawaii to, say, the Philippines, Nicaragua, Vietnam, wherever their family members are. Mm-hmm.
How does that work? So you go to a Safeway and you say, I want to transfer some amount of money
Right.
to another country, to the Philippines, which is where my family is at. Okay.
Right.
So I go to the Safeway and I say, I want to do what in order to be able to do that?
So you go to I think Western Union is at Safeway.
Mm-hmm.
So you go there and you say, I want to transfer $1,000 to my family in the Philippines.
Mm-hmm.
So you fill out some paperwork. The paperwork is crucial, and that's what we look at when we go and examine them. We make sure that they are collecting information about you
Mm-hmm.
as a transferor and collecting information about the recipient. And they have to.
Okay.
That's part of our laws,
Mhm.
both state and federal, that they must collect all of that information so that if the money doesn't reach the recipient, when they complain to us, the consumer complains to us,
Mhm.
we have some record and we can go and look for the recipient's financial institution where it would have gone to. We also regulate what's now called mortgage loan originators and mortgage loan originator companies. Those are the former mortgage brokers,
Okay.
solicitors. So those are the folks that help consumers finance. They find a lender to finance your real estate transaction.
And whose behalf are they acting on?
The consumer.
The consumer's behalf.
Right. So say you want to buy a house. So I think the whole real estate transaction starts off with, you want to buy a house. You find a real estate agent to help you out. Once you find what you're looking for, the real estate agent might have a connection with a mortgage loan originator,
Mhm.
former broker.
Okay.
That broker will gather all of their financial information to look for a lender that will finance your home.
Okay. All right.
So that's sort of the intermediary person also. The real estate person also opens escrow
Okay.
for you once all of this is probably a little further along.
Should you go it alone, or should you get an attorney?
I wouldn't necessarily get an attorney.
Okay.
You should probably, you can use one of these mortgage loan originators. They have connections with a lot of lenders.
Mm-hmm.
For the most part, even though you're paying a fee to the mortgage loan originator, if you have no idea of who these lenders are,
Mm-hmm.
that's probably the best place you should go.
Okay.
You can also see if these mortgage loan originators are licensed
Mm-hmm.
on what's called the NMLS system. It's a web-based system, and you put the mortgage loan originator's name in.
Mm-hmm.
It'll tell you whether or not this person is licensed in our state
Okay.
or not licensed. You should
Okay.
only do business with someone licensed in our state.
And why is that? Because of different regulations and.
Well, we know
different-
that they are following the regulations, and we
Okay.
have, if something would happen in your transaction along the way,
Mm-hmm.
if you complain to us, we can investigate them.
Was there more the areas in which you regulate?
Mortgage servicers.
And who are these people?
So these are the people that the banks contract with to accept payments, your mortgage payments. So, you got your loan from the lender,
Mhm.
many of whom we regulate in this state. And the banks will contract with what's called mortgage servicer to
Okay.
collect the payments for them. Some of the examples of mortgage servicers are, let me think, Green Tree
Okay.
Services, PHH,
Okay.
Plaza Home Loans. Those are some of the big name services. Aquin.
But the Hawaii banks do have mortgage servicing operations.
They
So
do.
Right, yeah.
they will service their own loans.
So if the banks are not servicing their own loans, they will contract it out.
And are these servicers also the ones who at one point you're with Bank of America and then somebody else takes over the mortgage? Are these the ones who make
The servicers, yes.
the servicers make those decisions in terms of changes?
Right.
Should you be worried when a transfer like that occurs?
Not really. I mean, I
Okay.
think that there are many of these transfers going on. Sometimes the servicer they're deciding that they want to get out of the Hawaii market, for instance.
Mhm.
So they will transfer their entire portfolio, all of their loans, to another servicer who does the loans in Hawaii.
Okay.
Or, they lose the person that's actually processing all of these loan payments for Hawaii,
Mm-hmm.
and then they have to find somebody else to do it.
What do you do in regards to making sure that all these people involved in transactions like that are actually safeguarding your information?
So in our examinations, for all of the industries that we supervise and regulate, we make sure that they're following the rules about
Okay.
security. So banks, the mortgage loan originators, the escrow companies, the money transmitters, the mortgage servicers. So all 5 industries that we regulate,
Mhm.
we do make sure that they are following all of those safeguarding rules. What we tell them is their staff should not be sending what's called personal identifiable information over to the consumer.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if the consumer sends it to the company, we
Right.
can't really help that.
Yeah.
But when one of our industries replies back, they need to make sure that they redact all that information.
Mm-hmm.
They don't just hit the reply button. And so if it wasn't hacked the first time, it might be hacked the second time.
Yeah.
Because it's going out. And we hold the banks or the servicers responsible for that.
What is the scheme there? What is the protocol there in terms of raising the level of saying, we found that you have this 3 minor things and you need to correct that, or we found 2 things that are pretty substantial and you better take care of that,
Mhm.
or wow, you really have messed this thing up and we're going to have to take some actions.
For all of our banks, as our banks know, we go in and examine them every year.
Okay.
And that's one of the things that we look for to make sure that they are safeguarding all of that information. So I can say that all of our banks that we regulate are doing a really good job at that.
Thank you for that assurance. Okay.
So we haven't found any glaring violations of the banks or the bank personnel sending out any confidential information like that.
But it doesn't mean that the security, the firewalls of all of our banks have never been breached.
I don't think that they have been breached.
That's amazing in today's world.
The banks spend a lot of money
Mm-hmm.
trying to make sure that their firewalls are pretty safe. They have, for consumers, they have what's called dual authentication, which means that if you use online banking or mobile banking, which a lot of people use, there's 2 passwords that you actually need before you can get to your account. We get a lot of complaints from consumers that's pretty unnecessary, takes a long time, they forget one password or a second password.
I'll be one of those. I
Right.
can't remember passwords.
Right. So, and what we tell them is that the banks are doing that for their own protection.
Mm-hmm.
Once your information gets out and your identity might be stolen, it could take 6 months to a year before you can get back to
Oh,
where
really?
you were.
Banks are bound by literally a mountain of regulations.
Yes.
That encourages them to use the utmost security measures to protect their customers' information. And the regulations are important, but certainly not as important as the commitment of the banks, especially the local banks, to
Mhm.
protect that data.
Okay.
So there are absolutely millions of dollars spent annually to protect their customers' information. Cybersecurity is a serious problem. We know that nationally, federally, there are efforts to create new cybersecurity task forces and measures, but rest assured that the banks here are doing everything they can to protect their customers' information.
Well, having said that, I think the basic question is there anything really 100% secure in cyberspace? Or is it just staying ahead of the game?
That's a difficult question. Of course, we'd like to think that we're ahead of the game, but these crooks are very well organized and very technologically astute, and they look for any crack in the armor of the financial institutions. The good thing is there are many financial institutions. So if you're well protected, they're likely to move on to another victim or they'll prey on somebody else.
Well,
so that's why the banks have to be armed with absolutely the best available security measures.
Well, yeah, I mean, going back to this issue of targeting, Target was that millions of data or data on people was lost. Morgan Stanley just got hit with 78 million people's information compromised. When they go to that scale, I mean, when they collect, instead of targeting individuals, okay, they now collect, okay, all of this massive amount of information. Why do you think they're doing that?
You know, the days of the local crooks or the kids playing and stealing wallets and things like that are long gone. I mean, they still exist, but these financial crimes are being perpetrated by very organized criminal elements. You know, in Russia, in China, in India, in certainly Nigeria. We've heard a lot about that. I just saw that, you know, there's most smartphones you can download a flashlight application.
Yes.
That flashlight application, 9 out of 10 of them have some kind of malware in there that is collecting your information and sending it to China or to Russia or to India or what have you.
But doesn't it sound like cyber is that secure then? You know, they're finding this innovative and creative ways.
We're doing everything we can,
Okay.
but is it enough? Probably not.
So let's start by your view on the safeguards that financial institutions are building in, okay, to try and protect them. And then let's turn to what are the consumers' responsibilities with regards to this, if not even responsibilities, but what are the things that they can do to safeguard their information and assist the institutions in being able to maintain the integrity of the information and their finances?
Well, the whole realm of cybersecurity protection is, I don't pretend to be an expert, but it is about protecting your data from penetration by perpetrators. And so there are multiple firewalls involved. There are multiple authentications, as Iris mentioned. All of these measures are there to do our very best to protect the data. And as Iris indicated, I'm not aware of any serious breaches of data at a financial institution in Hawaii.
Okay. But it doesn't mean that individuals here have not been somehow scammed.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what is it then that individuals are doing that gets them into trouble?
Well, you know, you may have heard of phishing, PFISH,
Yes.
where people are using the internet or the telephone to suggest to you that that your account, your credit card, your debit card has been compromised, and they first of all will protect you from that, but they need you to authenticate who you are, to verify who you say you are. So they ask you for your account number, they ask you for your secret code, and all of these things, and your social security number. And of course, you know, we tell all of our consumers all the time, do not provide that information to anybody, especially someone you don't know. A bank will never contact you by telephone or by internet to ask you for that kind of information.
Let's reiterate that with regards to personal data in banks and the phone.
Right. So realize that banks will never ask you for personal information over the phone or via the internet, because by and large they have that information. So they should never be asking you for it. So if you're presented with a situation where someone is asking you for that type of sensitive information, it's probably a fraudster.
Mhm.
So you should hang up the phone,
Mhm.
or you should disconnect your internet, get off your internet connection. If you have inadvertently provided information and subsequently wonder whether you should have or not,
Yeah.
you should by all means contact your financial institution, let them know what has happened, and they will advise you as to whether we need to shut down that account, open a new account, or take whatever other measures that might be appropriate. Or even mail sometimes.
Even
I
mail.
believe.
You know, I have a question with regards to phone. They call you either in your caller ID, it's unknown, or recently there's been this whole host of calls from area code 202. How do they do that?
So some of it is just through programming.
Mhm.
So you can, I don't know how you do this exactly, but there is a way to program the phone number that's received on your smartphone, so you can see the phone number to
Mhm.
whatever it is that you want it to look like. So you want it to look like it's from some government agency.
Mm-hmm.
You have it come up FTC, or the FDIC, or whatever government agency you think that you want to represent, that you are part of.
How do you trust but verify who it is that's calling you? Or is it a matter of context and subject matter? What would you advise?
There's a lot of that, but as Ed said, banks will never ask for information like that. They already have it.
Mm-hmm.
So if your bank cards or your account was really compromised,
Mm-hmm.
that yours is probably not the only one. There would be a widespread media release about that,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and then they would tell you what to do.
Yeah.
If yours was the only one, if you had responded to one of these scammers, the banks will help you get back to where you were.
We always tell our consumers, make sure you check your monthly statements, make sure you report any unusual activity of any kind to your
Mhm.
financial institution as quickly as possible, so that we can help our consumers, our customers, protect themselves.